Well, hello, everyone. I am Joni Lorraine. I am the program coordinator for Unity Worldwide Spiritual Institute's Spiritual Direction program, and I'm so grateful and excited that Jeanmarie Eck, a spiritual director and a particularly important contributor to our program, is here with me today to visit about spiritual direction. Jeanmarie, can you tell us just a little bit about your background and what you bring to this special work of spiritual direction?
Thank you, Joni. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this. I attended ministerial school at Unity Institute and studied with Robert Brumett. And in the program, one of the courses was on spiritual direction. So that was my first introduction to it. And after that, I went into ministry, and something was tugging on my heart to go deeper into spiritual direction it had resonated in me in a way that nothing else had, that it taps into your intuitive, non-linear, creative thinking, really into your higher self, while incorporating all the aspects of your life. There's nothing forbidden from spiritual direction. So I just see it as an opportunity to bring your life before spirit, and the spirit in me, the spirit that we are, in the presence of another and of a director who can guide me and facilitate that. So that experience brought me into training. I trained at the Perkins School of Theology for 3 years to be a spiritual director. And then I had the opportunity to be a part of the spiritual direction team at UWM, who put together this program. And so I'm really grateful. We put a lot of prayer into it, that it is under your direction and that is thriving. And I'm happy to continue to be a part of the Spiritual Direction Advisory Council.
Oh, thank you so much. I love what I do, and uh, kismet, serendipitous, and spirit all moving through the opportunity to be able to do it. I'm still after 2 years still as excited, I think, as the first year I came in. How do you define spiritual direction for us? What is your interpretation of spiritual direction?
I know that each person has innate wisdom and guidance for their own life. I may not know what you need for your life, but you know within you. And spiritual direction creates that sacred container and relationship. We can discover things in relationship with someone that we may not discover just in our own exploration. When you're in the presence of someone who's holding that space with you and asking questions that allow you to go deeper, things arise from your very being that are ahas and insights and guidance. And it's greatly personal. Whereas in spiritual community, we have Sunday services, we have classes, we have opportunities that are communal, but spiritual direction meets you right where you are. And so it has a role and a function in our spiritual life like nothing else, because your spiritual director creates a bond of trust with you, where you can share what you choose to share about your journey and explore that. And it has guided me in wonderful ways in my life, and to different roles and opportunities, and writing sermons, and just all the different things that I do in my personal life and my spiritual life. It's kind of all encompassing.
You bring up another question that people often have about spiritual direction. How is it different than pastoral counseling? How is it how is it different from therapy and those other modalities of helping professions?
In pastoral counseling, when I meet someone for counseling, it is issue based. So we have a limit of 3 times that I'll meet with somebody on an issue, and it's really to work through that issue and to come into certain way to proceed, way to understand it spiritually, and then it's complete. Spiritual direction is an ongoing relationship. When I work with someone as a spiritual director, I request a minimum of 6 months to work together because it takes time to build that trust and to get to know each other in such a way that that deeper processing can happen. As far as therapy, it is not a process where we will go into your subconscious, your history, like working through trauma, that kind of thing. It's that we would, I actually recommend having a therapist and a spiritual director to balance the two, because things can come up in therapy that a therapist is not going to go into the spiritual aspect of the situation with you. And in spiritual direction, there may be some things that are really going to be more helpful to address in therapy.
Well, how does it support your life personally, if you're willing to say so, and how has it blessed your life as well as a seeker, let's say?
First, I would say it serves in an accountability with my spiritual director that I know I'm going to meet with him once a month. And so I know what my practice is during the month. I'm going to be sharing that with him in our session. So it helps me to know that there's somebody who cares about my spiritual practice and is going to inquire about it. We're going to be able to have a discussion about it and can support me if there's anywhere that I need support, or that something's come up that I want to talk through or work through. It does allow me to process my spiritual experiences with somebody who is a little further down the path than I am. So he offers me wisdom. I mean, I think he's a lot further down the path than I am, but it depends on on who your spiritual director is. That can offer me insights and experience and see it from a really grounded perspective that I feel that he brings. And he asked me some hard questions that allow me to really see myself and maybe even see my blind spots that I am not noticing, and to work through those. And so I've strengthened in some areas that I've been working through. I've been working with my spiritual director for a few years now. And what I thought I was bringing to spiritual direction, sometimes something else shows up and it's like, oh, that was just something that it bubbled up through the conversation and through the process. And it really was the deeper level of what I needed to look at and work on and meditate on. So,
I I would say from personal experience, of course, that there have been a number, if not a majority, of experiences that I have in my sessions where I exclaim, "Well, that's not the way I thought that was going to go," and I am certain that is the work of the holy in the session rather than the work of the egos, the two egos sitting in the chair. That's something that we work in our training, no matter where you go or what training you have as a spiritual director. We work on hard on setting aside our presumptions, our egos, and allowing that holy experience of the expression of the Christ, if you will, or God moving through us to do the work. It's a wonderful example of that.
yes, I always say spirit is the director of the session. I'm there to facilitate that it's spirit working in the process. And that's why we're both in the session deeply listening for that guidance that's present. And I am noticing where there's energy, where certain threads show up in the conversation. Oh, let's follow that, and I'll inquire, and I will be very honoring of the person that I'm directing to see, does that resonate with you? Do you want to explore that a bit more? And together we go on this journey. And what's beautiful about it is that every time it's different, there's nothing planned. We open to spirit and we follow what shows up.
I love that. Are there specific instances or experiences that you might want to share with us or be willing to share with us about that making a difference in your vocation?
Yes, yes. Particularly with my spiritual director, who has had a lot more experience than I have. So I do lean on his experience and his wisdom, and I bounce things off of him, that of ideas for talks or classes, that because I really want to bring to my students truly the best, the deepest insights, the purest, truest wisdom, teachings, spiritual principle. And so he has definitely supported me in guiding the way when I have questions about things that I want to do in ministry, and also the direction of my ministry and where I want to focus. That really he helps me tap into my own guidance in exploring what would bring me joy and what's the most fulfilling for me. And it has helped me to eliminate some things from my work that were not, they were frustrating to me, and to recognize that I don't need to just do everything because it's there to be done. There are others who can be empowered and encouraged to have the opportunity to do that, and they're equipped to do that. So as a minister, I think one of the most valuable things to learn is to not take everything on yourself, and to know how to delegate and to equip others to do the work with you, that we do it in community. We don't do it as a solo.
It's interesting you mentioned that. We're recording this during Holy Week for those of you who are listening. And Jeanmarie and I had a conversation about how it's the Super Bowl. It's the Super Bowl for churches, Holy Week and Easter Sunday. And Jeanmarie, I think we have the same spiritual director, and we had this conversation yesterday about what can you give to someone else? How can you invite more life into what you're doing, rather than, in my case, letting life run me instead of me running my life, and allowing my life to move through me. I was just being pulled into the next thing that has to be done. And just the hour in that conversation is making all the difference in my day. I suspect it will make a difference in the rest of my week. So in my case, sometimes just having a witness, and that is not to say that I didn't get a whole lot more out of yesterday than just being validated, but simply having a witness to those events that take us a little off center and away from our peace makes a huge difference. Can make a
Yes.
huge difference. Spiritual directors are trained to simply witness, as it were. Um,
Yes.
and in that case, can you tell us what happens in your experience during a session?
In a session, when I lead spiritual direction, I invite the directee into a time of centering and stillness. And so there's prayer. We take some time into the silence. And then I open up the session and say, well, what's on your heart today? Or what would you like to bring to spiritual direction? And usually in that time of silence, something shows up. Something always shows up that they would like to share. Perhaps they've thought about it in advance, or perhaps it just shows up in the moment. You don't have to do a lot of intense preparation for spiritual direction. It can really be what is on your heart. And there's always something that we're working on or working through, something that is showing up for us in our lives that Spirit's saying, pay attention to this. There's some healing to do here, or something with the body or relationship, something like that, whatever's up. And then the directee will start sharing about it, and I'm listening. I'm also, part of my practice is to really be in my body as I'm listening to the directee. So I'm with my breath. I'm noticing where my hands and feet are. I'm being mindful, because when I'm in my body and I'm really present with my energy, I can be even more present to them. So I'm practicing that, and I'm really listening. I'm bracketing aside, they call it bracketing, anything that might be mine, I put it aside, and I'm with that person fully. I fully bring my presence and really listen, and just notice where the energy is. Notice how things are moving, where Spirit is working in their life, how God's moving in their life, and we have a conversation around it. And one of the things that I've gotten that's been of real value in spiritual direction is moving from the head into the body, and just really having an embodied presence, listening to what are you feeling in your gut or in your solar plexus, your power center, in your heart, just being with how energy is showing up in the body. Because when we're with those sensations, you're feeling tightness or some kind of sharpness or different things, you can explore that. And out of that energy, because the body is always in the present moment. So it has so many insights that take you into that nonlinear thinking, where you can explore through imagery and sensation, and things show up in that process that are amazing, and that your mind may never take you into that place, but your body through Spirit does. Oh, and then so through the session, usually at the end, I will check in with the directee and see if they had the opportunity to share what they wanted to share in the session, and if they had insights, if they're experiencing greater freedom. So that's really always my intention, that the directee leaves feeling greater freedom than they did when they came in. And we always check in and just see how the process is working for the directee, and we might pray out at the end of the session. We schedule the next session, and so yeah.
Something you said in the beginning of your answer had to do with the silence.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if you might tell us your experience of the value of silence in spiritual direction.
I'll tell you about one particular example that I had that I brought to my spiritual director, where I was trying to make a very important life decision. And there were three different options that I was considering. And what he invited me to do was to have three different chairs, and each chair represented sitting in that decision, like feeling like I had made that decision, and what did that feel like in my body. No words, just sitting. And I sat for several minutes. I think it might have been 5 minutes in each decision, where I just sat in the silence, feeling what it would feel like to have made that decision. And by the end of that, I knew. And it was very clear, absolutely clear what I needed to do. And it was a decision that I had been wrestling with, a very important decision. And I felt so sure about it. And what it ended up being in the end, it was so much the best decision that for that situation, because some more information showed up later that I couldn't have even known at that point, that made that the perfect decision for me to make. And that's really just trusting Spirit in the process. And he facilitated me exploring that in that way. And it seems really simple. It's it was life changing.
I have a quote by Lao Tzu as my signature line. With knowledge, things are added. With wisdom, things are subtracted. And your experience reminds me of that. That we have what we need. It's spiritual direction is to me so in alignment with many unity principles that we have what we need. We are whole. We are complete, and we untangle or reveal the truth of that in our spiritual direction sessions in a way that provides people with freedom and provides folks with, I like to say, the opportunity to flourish, which is what I want. And I presume that that is true for the folks who come to see me. I think that spiritual direction is huge in growing our emotional and spiritual quotient. And if you want to take a minute to sort of sit with that, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how that might be true.
I won't take a whole minute. So, let's see. Emotional intelligence. It does require you to be present to how you are feeling in the moment, in the experience. My spiritual director asked me, "What are you feeling in the body right now? What are you feeling?" And to practice that regularly, to learn, it's actually, I think, a skill to learn, to be able to do that. And when you get into that practice, you're just really being in touch with your own human experience, and what could be more authentic than to be real and know what's going on in you rather than a story or what you think people want you to say. Just to really be in the moment, grounded. So definitely an expansion in emotional intelligence. Spiritual intelligence, it gives an opportunity to explore your spirituality in a personal way that's beyond reading a book about it or listening to a sermon. It's how Spirit's working in your own life, which is unscripted. It really is. We can have mentors and models, but to know and understand how Spirit is working in your life is a personal journey. And I think the most exciting journey that we can be on, people call it the hero's journey, that we're the hero or heroine of our own story. And to navigate that with a guide, I think of a spiritual director like my own Gandalf, or a guide on the journey who's not going to do the work for you, but will say, here are the paths, and so where's your heart leading you, and helping you to trust yourself.
Something you said reminded me, and I did a different kind of interview earlier this week with a pretty decorated young choreographer who is combining and doing things with dance in such a way that it's an experience. And so much of what she said reminded me of the communal experience of spirituality that can, and I mean, I'll just say it this way, that should occur in church, but is not limited to church. That for people like you and me who are creatives, it occurs, this creativity, the spiritual aspect of creativity occurs in typical places like when we're doing a live performance, or even for me in rehearsal or such. And we all get moved by varying levels of a transcendent experience. So I don't know what that has to do, and I don't know if there's a question in there, but I am curious if you have, as a creative, have had some sort of experience of the connection of creativity and spiritual direction.
Yes. That example, Joni, that is great. I do connect the experience that I have as a performing artist of when you know your part and it's time to perform, and it's no longer in your head, it's in your body. You're in it. You're just fully in it. You are it. And that is what embodied spirituality is like, that you're really feeling your authentic self, and you are laying aside, it's that unlearning, laying aside the masks, the sub personalities, all of that, and really being in your power and your presence. That's a part of it. And I do feel when I'm in spiritual direction, which is one of the reasons that I love it, that feeling of being in the zone. There's that presence, like you were explaining, being in a theatrical performance where it's happening in the moment, and you're feeling it. There's an energy, and there's like a transcendence to it because of the power of the presence. It's really can be a palpable experience, and it takes trust and time to build a relationship in this way where that can create the container for that to unfold for somebody. And it does. It's just, I've seen it time and again, and it really is the work of spirit in this.
Who seeks and would benefit most from spiritual direction? And who might be a good fit for a program in training for spiritual direction?
I think spiritual direction is appropriate for everyone because it meets you right where you are. I don't think that there are any limits on who would be a good candidate as a directee. I think everyone would benefit from that kind of support in life. And I've seen people of varying levels of involvement in the church who have engaged in spiritual direction and found a great benefit to it. So you could be new to unity or being on a spiritual journey. You can have been in it for many decades and never had a spiritual director, or even had other spiritual directors, and come back into spiritual direction. It really meets you where you are. So as far as being a spiritual director, it requires somebody who really does have a deep commitment to their spiritual life, to having a spiritual practice, enjoying being holding sacred space, prayerful consciousness, being in a one-on-one conversation with someone that is meaningful and deep. You need to have a good level of confidentiality. You must keep everything confidential. That's essential in spiritual direction. So if you're trained to do that as a minister, but the ministry of spiritual direction is not limited to clergy. Other people, lay people, we don't use that word so much in unity, but lay people are definitely called into spiritual direction. I've seen many people who have been in other kind of helping professions like therapists and counselors, and that they have an easy affinity into it and understanding the difference between that and spiritual direction. So I think that the first step, if you're interested in becoming a spiritual director, is to be in spiritual direction and to really be in that experience for yourself. And then talk to Joni and see if it's the right fit for you. That's what I would do. It really is an excellent program that we have at Unity, and it's the only program I know of that is a spiritual direction program in the New Thought tradition that really is also interspiritual. That's something that I don't think I mentioned, that you don't have to be in the same spiritual path to be a spiritual director for someone, because as a spiritual director, you learn to speak that person's language. So you're directing them in their language wherever they are in the process. And so I feel like I'm bilingual in that way, that
Mm.
it has given me the capacity to do that with another person, and to meet them where they are in their understanding of God and life and their own journey.
Jeanmarie, thank you so much for being with me today. And I, again, am so grateful for your presence with me today. I am grateful for your presence in our program. I am grateful for your presence in the Unity movement. And I'm grateful for your creativity and the gifts that you have that you share with others in that way as well. So thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Joni. It's been an honor and a pleasure to spend this time with you.